the hard reality. You weren't hurt because you were too kind. You were hurt because you were too predictable, too silent, too patient, too easy to read, and even easier to use. You believed your goodness would be your shield, that if you just kept giving, kept forgiving, kept showing up, it would eventually be enough. But it wasn't, because in a world where cruelty disguises itself as charm, kindness without boundaries becomes bait. You thought your patience made you strong, but all it did was train them to expect you'd never leave. You kept returning, kept justifying, kept sacrificing pieces of yourself to keep the peace, until one day, you looked around and realized you were the only one still bleeding. Why? Because they knew something you didn't. You had no consequence. Your silence didn't carry weight. Your presence was never expensive, and your absence was never felt. That's where everything breaks. Machiavelli never romanticized kindness. He didn't whisper comforting lies. He wrote truths that still burn today. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Not because fear is stronger than love, but because fear, unlike love, is respected immediately. This world doesn't reward purity. It respects presence. It calculates cost. And when crossing you is no cost, you will be crossed again and again. This isn't for the sweet. It's for the silent warriors who've been drained in the name of loyalty. For those who gave everything and were met with silence, distance, and excuses. If you've ever helped until you were empty and they still walked away. Apologize for things you didn't do just to avoid conflict. Stayed far too long, hoping love alone would change them. Then this is your moment. Not to become cruel, but to become calculated. Not to harden your heart, but to sharpen your boundaries. Because the truth is this: you don't need to yell to be powerful. You don't need to explain to be understood. You just need to become someone whose presence has weight. Let your silence carry warning. Let your absence teach what your words never could. Let your boundaries whisper what your kindness once screamed. If you're done bleeding for people who never noticed you were cut, you're not alone. This isn't just philosophy. It's protection. It's strategy. It's your awakening. Welcome to the world of Machiavelli. Part 1, The Hidden Pain. No one ever warned you about this. The more good you are, the more invisible you become. That kindness, when unguarded, doesn't make people stay. It makes it easier for them to leave. They didn't abandon you because you were unworthy. They walked away because they knew you wouldn't. You became the warmth in their winter, and when they were no longer cold, they forgot where the fire came from. You were the quiet strength in every storm. The one who listened when no one else did. The one who said it's okay, even when it was tearing you apart inside. And somewhere along the way, you disappeared. Not all at once, but slowly, like a flame gasping for air in a room full of closed doors. Not a scream, not a collapse, just a silent fading. No one stayed to witness. But here's what they never told you. This isn't weakness. This is what happens when goodness walks without armor. Loyalty isn't matched. Empathy becomes obligation. You didn't lose yourself because you loved too hard. You lost yourself because you kept loving those who didn't even try to meet you halfway. And that's the contract no one ever explains. When you offer love without conditions, you teach them to take without limits. You thought kindness would teach them your value, but it only taught them you wouldn't leave. Because here's the brutal truth. Love doesn't create respect. Boundaries do. Sacrifice doesn't earn loyalty. Standards do. If you never say enough, they will never stop taking. If you never walk away, they'll never fear losing you. Because they've never had to. And that's where your pain was born. Not from betrayal, but from your decision to stay even after it. Let that settle. You didn't just get hurt. You allowed it because you were taught that. Love meant endurance. Compassion meant staying. Silence meant strength. But it's not true. The world doesn't break you with betrayal. It breaks you with patterns of subtle disrespect. The unanswered messages. The last-minute cancellations. The excuses that pile up while you keep making space. You learned to understand everyone, but forgot to understand yourself. You kept the peace while your soul screamed for war. And the worst part? You thought this was love. You thought patience was power. But power doesn't mean staying. Power is knowing when to leave and actually doing it. Because what you tolerate becomes a blueprint for how you are treated. What you allow is what continues. You gave them loyalty, time, silence, forgiveness, and they responded with absence, excuses, convenience. But here's the truth that changes everything. You don't need to become cruel. You need to become clear. Clear that your love has value. Your energy is earned. Anyone who crosses your peace loses access. This isn't revenge. It's recalibration. And once you see this clearly, you'll never beg to be seen again. Because now you're done setting yourself on fire to keep people warm who never asked what it came from. Bleeding quietly. Now you stand not with noise but with standard. And the next time someone crosses you, they won't hear a word. They'll feel your absence. And that is where your strength begins. Part 2, the deeper mechanism. Have you ever noticed? The more available you are, the less they value your presence. The more you give, the more they expect, not with gratitude, but with entitlement. It's not personal. It's mechanical. We're not just emotional creatures. We're pattern-seeking machines. And when a pattern is too easy to predict, it loses its power. Your kindness, your patience, your forgiveness. To the untrained eye, they seem noble. But to the subconscious, they signal something else entirely. No consequence lives here. Machiavelli didn't write poems. He wrote maps. Maps to power, to perception, to psychological leverage. He said, men are driven by two principal impulses, love and fear. And when love becomes constant, unquestioned, guaranteed, it stops being valuable. It becomes noise. Because human nature doesn't protect what's always available. It protects what can be lost. That's the harsh truth no one wants to admit. If your love has no line, it has no weight. If your presence costs nothing, it will be taken for granted. And if you've ever wondered, why do they respect those who say less? Why do they listen to the ones who hold their silence? It's because silence, when chosen, becomes structure. It becomes tension. It creates possibility for consequence. And possibility rewires behavior. You don't have to threaten. You don't have to raise your voice. You just have to become unpredictable enough that they can't assume your forgiveness is automatic. That's the difference between being nice and being respected. Nice is predictable. Nice is safe. Nice is soft. But respected? Respected is steady, not soft. Quiet, not timid. Available, but earned. Because the subconscious doesn't ask, do they love me? It asks, can I cross them and still keep access? That's the deeper game Machiavelli understood, and most never will. You can smile, you can care, you can lead with heart, but the moment you remove tension from your boundaries, the moment people know you'll never walk away, you become harmless. And in power dynamics, harmless means disposable. That's why they stopped texting back. Your kindness didn't change them. Your love didn't fix what was broken. Because love isn't enough if it doesn't come with limits. So here's what shifts. You don't scream anymore. You don't over-explain. You don't hope they'll get it. You become calm, cold, clear, and they feel it. They text faster. They show up earlier. They speak more carefully. Not because you became cruel, but because they finally felt something they never did before. A boundary. This isn't manipulation. It's clarity. This isn't power over others. It's sovereignty over your access. And the moment they realize your time is no longer free, your energy is no longer unquestioned, your silence is no longer permission, that's the moment everything changes. You don't say, respect me. You say nothing. And still they do. Part 3, the common mistakes. If there's one thing more dangerous than being weak, it's being good without wisdom. Because goodness without discernment is how strong people get destroyed. Kindness without clarity becomes erosion. Love becomes a leash, tight, invisible, self-inflicted. Most people don't realize they're being broken because the breaking doesn't scream. It whispers in patterns, in habits. Let's name them. Mistake number 1. Thinking sincerity is enough. You thought, if I love deeply enough, wait long enough, forgive completely, they'll finally see my worth. But sincerity without standards isn't strength. It's noise. It doesn't anchor. It doesn't draw respect. It doesn't say, if you cross this line, I disappear. Because here's the truth. People don't respect your kindness. They respect your capacity to withhold it. Mistake number 2, tying your worth to how they treat you. They withdrew, you blamed yourself. They vanished, you chased. They disrespected you, and you asked what you did wrong. But their failure wasn't proof of your unworthiness. It was proof of their character. And when you internalize their failure, you hand them power they never earned. That's not love. That's self-erasure. Mistake number 3, being the one who never says no. You fear being selfish, so you overgave. You feared being alone, so you stayed. You poured and poured until your cup cracked. Then the day finally came when you said no, and they looked at you like you changed. No, they were just addicted to your silence. And now they're panicking from the sound of your boundary. Mistake number 4, thinking silence is enough. You pulled back, hoping they'd reflect. You stopped texting, hoping they'd notice. You stayed quiet, hoping they'd hear what you weren't saying. But silence without consequence doesn't teach. It enables. In a power dynamic, silence only matters if people believe what follows might hurt. If nothing follows, they'll push further. Mistake number 5, believing love is the ultimate goal. You molded yourself to be liked. You smiled when you were in pain. You apologized for bleeding. You tried to become their fantasy, and in the process, you abandoned your own truth. But Machiavelli would say, don't ask if they love you. Ask if they fear losing you. Because love without risk becomes comfort, and comfort kills respect. So if you've made these mistakes, don't spiral into shame. Don't call yourself weak. You weren't weak. You were untrained. You were lied to. You were told. That kindness is always good. That love always wins. That patience always heals. But no one told you this. Love without boundary isn't love. It's self-sabotage. Patience without discernment isn't noble. It's self-abandonment. Now you see it. And once you see it, you can never go back. You don't need to harden. You don't need to rage. You just need to draw the line. And mean it, because the world doesn't just test your strength. It tests your softness. And if your softness has no edge, they will keep pressing until you disappear. But you're not disappearing anymore. You're recalibrating. You're rewriting. You're remembering who you were before they taught you to shrink. And that is not weakness. That is the beginning of power. Part 4, the foundational philosophy. Let's stop pretending. The world doesn't reward the kind. It uses them. It doesn't honor the loyal. It tests them until they collapse. It doesn't protect the good. It feeds on them. That's not cynicism. It's history. Ask Caesar. Ask Machiavelli. Ask the ones who bled for ideals and were devoured by men with strategy. Machiavelli didn't write bedtime stories. He wrote for survivors, for those caught in a world that punishes purity and worships perception. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. To the naive, that sounds brutal. To the used, it sounds like salvation. Because Machiavelli never praised cruelty. He exposed the consequences of power imbalance. He understood that love is emotional, but fear is structural. Love wavers with mood. Fear survives in memory. You can love someone and still betray them, but you cannot truly respect someone and cross their boundary without hesitation. Because respect isn't just about admiration. It's about cost. And where there is no cost, there is no consideration. Carl Jung saw it too. He called it the shadow, the part of yourself you hide, the predator, the manipulator, the cold strategist, the parts you buried to be loved. But in burying them, you became prey. Because when you disown your shadow, you become vulnerable to those who don't. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Carl Jung, so you thought, if I just stay kind, if I stay honest, the world will reward me. But nature laughed at that. Virtue is only virtue when it's teeth. Do not mistake weakness for goodness. He who cannot command himself must obey. These weren't words of pessimism. They were maps for those tired of bleeding silently. Because here's the brutal foundation. Power doesn't corrupt. It clarifies. It reveals who's real and who is only kind because they had no power. And if your goodness isn't backed by clarity, it's not noble, it's negotiable. Because they're not reading your intention. They're reading your posture, your tone, your eyes when a line is crossed. And if your reaction is always softness, they'll press harder. Why? Because in the absence of consequence, even civilized people become dangerous. You think silence is strength? Not if it teaches them you will stay no matter what. You think forgiveness is noble? Not if it gives them permission to hurt you again. You think kindness will inspire them to change? It won't if they know you'll never leave. So here's what Machiavelli really taught. You don't become dangerous by raising your voice. You become dangerous by drawing your lines in stone. You don't become respected by being liked. You become respected by being clear. The type of clarity that doesn't negotiate, doesn't beg, doesn't ask twice. The type of clarity that makes people think twice before they speak to you recklessly. Because when your absence is feared more than your presence is liked, you've stepped into sovereignty. That's not arrogance. That's emotional realism. Power doesn't mean domination. It means filtration. It means access. And when someone dares test your threshold, you don't raise your tone. You raise the cost. Because that's the law Machiavelli knew, and the lesson most people learn far too late. The enemy isn't power. The real enemy is blind kindness. Part 5, the shift in thinking. There's no explosion, no scream, no final straw that breaks you into rage. There's just a moment, quiet, almost invisible, where something inside you doesn't shatter. It sharpens. It doesn't yell enough. It simply whispers. No more. No more. Over-explaining to people who never listened. Apologizing for being hurt. Showing up for those who never checked if you were breathing. This is not bitterness. This is a shift. The kind that doesn't announce itself. It just starts moving furniture inside your mind. And suddenly, you don't fit where you used to bend. You stop asking, why did they hurt me? And start asking, why did I stay after they did? You stop saying, they changed, and realize they were always like that. I just didn't want to see it. Because this is what happens when clarity replaces hope. You stop romanticizing potential. You start reading patterns. You listen less to what they say and more to what they repeat. How do they react when you say no? Do they respect your space or punish your independence? Do they lean in with care or press harder when you set boundaries? Their reaction to your strength reveals everything about their soul. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You don't need rage. You need resolve. You don't harden. You refine. You become still, but heavier now. When they say you change, you smile, not with spite, with peace. Because yes, you're no longer the one who begs to be heard. You're the one whose silence changes the temperature in the room. No more chasing love. No more bending into a shape they can digest. You stand, even if your knees shake, even if your hands tremble, even if you're terrified. Because for the first time, you're not waiting to be chosen. You choose you. You no longer fear losing people. You fear losing yourself. And when someone crosses a line, you don't argue. You don't explain. You don't send 3 paragraphs hoping they'll understand. You simply step back. And this time, the door doesn't creak. It slams, not with noise, with certainty. You used to scream to be heard. Now your silence is the loudest thing they hear. You used to hope they'd see your value. Now you act like you see it. You used to cry, beg, bleed. Now you forge a spine out of all those wounds. Not to hurt anyone, but to make sure you're never hurt that way again. And when they come back, because they always do, you won't need to block them. You won't need to speak. They'll see it in your eyes, in your stillness, in the quiet way you breathe like someone who no longer needs them. You don't hate them. You just don't bleed for them anymore. And that is a shift. Part 6, practical application. The shift has happened. You've awakened. But how do you live this in the real world? Where power is read in posture, not speeches. Where respect isn't declared. It's felt the moment you walk in. Let's make it tangible. 1, your voice changes. No more nervous over explaining. No more leaking emotion in the name of clarity. I just think maybe, if that's okay. Strong. That doesn't happen again. Then silence. Let them feel the pause. Let them sit in your stillness and realize they've entered dangerous ground. Your words no longer beg to be heard. They land like stone. 2, your presence shifts. Stop shrinking in rooms. Stop smiling to be liked. Stop rushing to seem safe. Walk in slower. Breathe deeper. Hold eye contact a second longer. Your body now says, I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to be respected. That alone shifts the energy of any room. 3, redefine conflict. Stop fearing it. Conflict is a filter, not a failure. Not every battle needs volume. Just one clear sentence. If this happens again, I'm gone. Then follow through, no speech, no guilt. You're not performing control anymore. You become it. 4, audit your circle. No more begging people to care. Rewarding potential. Entertaining ghosts. Ask one question. Does this person nourish or drain me? If the answer isn't immediately clear, walk, not in rage, in refinement. 5, become less predictable. Don't answer texts instantly. Don't announce your moves. Don't hand out emotions like free samples. Predictability is weakness in power dynamics. Now you move with rhythm, not routine. Speak less, but make every word hit. Delay responses, not as games, but as sovereignty. Suddenly, they lean in. They weigh their words. They adjust, because now there's cost. This is silent power. It doesn't shout, doesn't seek validation, doesn't need to prove anything. It walks into a room, and the room adjusts. You used to ask, what do I say to be taken seriously? Now you say less. Hold more. You don't hand out access, you grant it. And those who cross you, you don't punish. You don't post quotes. You vanish, effortlessly, permanently. And in that silence, they learn, because you no longer raise your voice. You raise the price. Part 7, the new face of strength. This is where everything changes, not in them, but in you. You no longer walk into rooms hoping to be welcomed. You walk in and the temperature shifts, not because you demand attention, because you carry presence. You're no longer loud, no longer desperate to be seen, no longer afraid of silence. You become something far more rare, grounded in a world addicted to noise. Your eyes don't scan for approval, they observe. Words don't fight to be understood, they land. Boundaries unexplained, they're felt. When you say no now, it doesn't come with apology. It comes with gravity. And when they test you, they second guess. They recalculate. Not because you intimidate, because they know you're no longer available for disrespect. This isn't cold, it's currency. Your time, no longer free. Your energy, earned. Your peace, non-negotiable. You used to give freely. Now it's sacred. You used to keep the door open. Now it's locked, and only the consistent get a key. That's not ego. That's emotional hygiene. Because you finally understand, true strength doesn't gather crowds. It moves alone, and in doing so, attracts only those mature enough to sit in silence with you. The final realization. You stopped fearing rejection, started fearing self-betrayal, stopped tolerating chaos, started protecting peace, stopped chasing love, started filtering for alignment. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you to shrink. And when you meet that version of yourself again, you won't announce your transformation. You won't post about it. You'll simply live it in the way you pause before responding, way you no longer justify your choices, way your absence speaks louder than your presence ever did. Because the most dangerous person isn't the one who screams. It's the one who walks away without a word. And now, that's you. Final thought. Machiavelli didn't teach domination. He taught discernment. So don't announce your change. Become it. Let your silence correct behavior. Standards filter chaos. Absence echo louder than your presence ever did. You are no longer available to those who treat you as replaceable. You are a lock gate now. Not keep the world out, but to keep your sovereignty in. The revolution wasn't loud. It happened in whispers, in choices, in the moment you finally realized. You were never the problem. You were the prize. And prizes don't beg to be won. They're claimed,